In the polished lobby of an Ohio hotel, a racist clerk sneered at a black woman, refusing her a room with a chilling claim. But when Maya Carter's true identity came to light, the stunning twist left him speechless and scrambling to save his job. Maya Carter adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag, the frayed edges brushing against her faded denim jacket as she stepped into the gleaming lobby of the Sterling Heights Hotel in Columbus, Ohio. It was a humid July afternoon in 2025, the air thick with the scent of polished marble and lavender air freshener, the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the tiled floor. At 38, Maya was a renowned architect, her name whispered in industry circles for her innovative designs and her fierce commitment to inclusivity. But today she was dressed simply: jeans, sneakers, and a baseball cap pulled low over her braids. Her appearance a deliberate choice to test the hotel she'd designed 3 years ago, a project she'd poured her heart into to ensure it was a beacon of welcome for all. She'd spent countless nights sketching the lobby's layout, dreaming of a space where every guest, regardless of race or background, could feel at home, a dream that had driven her through sleepless nights and endless revisions, a dream that had been sparked by a painful memory from her childhood. Her mother turned away from a hotel on a family trip, her eyes brimming with tears as she whispered, "We'll find somewhere else, Maya." A moment that had shaped Maya's career, a moment that had brought her here today, determined to ensure no one else would feel that sting in a place she'd built with such love. The lobby was a masterpiece of modern design, with its sleek lines and warm lighting, the kind of place that should have felt inviting, but as Maya crossed the threshold, a sense of unease settled over her like a heavy cloak. Her mother's whispered words echoing in her mind, a haunting reminder of why this test mattered, why she couldn't let those whispers from her friends go unchecked. She'd heard those stories over coffee with her closest confidants, their voices low and trembling as they recounted their experiences. Black guests turned away at this very hotel, their dignity stripped away by cold dismissals, their stories a knife to Maya's heart, each one a betrayal of the vision she'd fought so hard to bring to life, a vision she'd clung to through every late night at the drafting table, every meeting with investors who doubted her, every moment she'd had to prove her worth in a world that often refused to see it. Her heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and dread as she approached the front desk, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the tiles, each step a reminder of the stakes, each echo a call to action she couldn't ignore, a call to honor her mother's quiet strength, to fight for the dream she'd built this hotel to embody. Behind the counter stood a clerk in his late 20s named Ethan Bradley, his crisp hotel uniform a stark contrast to the casual attire of the guests milling about, his pale blue eyes narrowing as he glanced up from his computer, taking in Maya's appearance with a scrutiny that felt like a physical weight, a scrutiny that reminded her of the hotel manager who'd turned her mother away all those years ago. His sneer a mirror to the one now forming on Ethan's lips, his expression sent a chill down Maya's spine, a look that spoke of judgment, of disdain, of a prejudice she'd hoped never to encounter in a place she'd created with such care. A prejudice that made her stomach twist with a familiar pain, a pain she'd buried deep but could never fully erase. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped, his fingers pausing mid-take, the lack of warmth in his voice a jarring contrast to the hotel's promise of hospitality etched on the wall behind him. "Welcome all," words that now felt like a cruel mockery, a hollow promise that deepened the ache in Maya's chest, an ache that threatened to unravel her, but instead it steeled her resolve, reminding her of the fire her mother had passed down, a fire that would not be extinguished by the likes of Ethan Bradley. "I'd like to book a room for the night," Maya said, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach, her hands resting lightly on the counter, the cool marble a grounding contrast to the heat rising in her chest. A heat born of years of fighting against the kind of prejudice she feared she was about to face, a heat that pulsed with the memory of her mother's tears, a heat that demanded justice, not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever been turned away from this hotel, from any place they deserved to belong. Ethan's sneer deepened, his gaze flicking over her casual attire, her faded jeans, her scuffed sneakers, her simple cap, his judgment clear as he leaned back in his chair, his arms crossing with a deliberate slowness that felt like a challenge, a silent dare for her to push back, to prove she belonged in a space he'd already decided she didn't. A space she'd built with her own hands, her own heart, her own dream. "We're fully booked," he said flatly, not even bothering to check his screen, his words landing like a slap, a lie so blatant it made Maya's breath catch in her throat, her eyes widening as she processed the audacity of his dismissal, the familiarity of his tone, a haunting echo of the past, a past she'd vowed to change, a past that now fueled her determination to fight. She glanced around the lobby, taking in the scene with a critical eye, her architect's mind noting every detail, the way the light played off the marble, the soft hum of conversation from the few guests present, the emptiness of the space that contradicted Ethan's claim, a space that should have been filled with the warmth she'd envisioned, but instead felt cold, unwelcoming, a betrayal of everything she'd worked for. Two other guests, both white, stood nearby. One, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, was checking in with ease, his laughter ringing out as he chatted with another clerk, his privilege a stark contrast to the cold reception Maya had received, his ease a painful reminder of the disparity she'd feared. The other, a woman in a crisp blazer, sipped coffee in the waiting area, her posture relaxed, her presence unchallenged, her comfort a silent indictment of the injustice unfolding before Maya's eyes. An injustice that cut deeper than she'd expected, an injustice that brought her mother's face to mind, her quiet dignity in the face of rejection, a lesson Maya now drew upon, a lesson that kept her standing tall, even as the world tried to push her down. Maya's fingers tightened on her bag, the frayed strap digging into her palm, her jaw clenching as she fought to keep her composure, her mind racing with the implications of Ethan's words, the betrayal of her vision, the sting of being turned away from her own creation, a creation she'd built not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever felt unwelcome, every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong, every person who'd deserved better than the cold dismissal she now faced. She'd spent years building this hotel, not just as a structure of glass and steel, but as a symbol of hope, a place where every guest could feel seen, valued, welcomed. A dream that now felt like a cruel joke as she stood there, facing the very prejudice she'd sought to dismantle, a prejudice that threatened to shatter her, but instead it forged her resolve, turning her hurt into a weapon she would wield with precision, a weapon that would soon turn the tables on the man who thought he could dismiss her so easily. "I'd like you to check again," she said, her tone firm, her eyes locking onto Ethan's with a quiet intensity that made him shift uncomfortably, his sneer faltering for a split second, a crack in his facade that gave Maya a fleeting glimpse of the unease beneath his arrogance, an unease that only fueled her determination, a determination born of her mother's strength, her own resilience, and the dream she refused to let die. Ethan's sneer returned, his arms still crossed, his voice dripping with condescension as he leaned forward slightly, his words a calculated strike meant to cut deep, to remind her of her place in a world he believed she didn't belong, a world she'd fought her whole life to change, a world she'd built this hotel to challenge. "I don't need to check. We don't have rooms for people like you," he said, the words slicing through the air like a blade, a blatant admission of the prejudice Maya had feared, a prejudice that confirmed her worst suspicions, a prejudice that ignited a fire in her chest, a fire that burned with the heat of righteous anger, a fire that carried the weight of her mother's tears, the strength of her own journey, and the hope of every guest who'd ever been turned away, a fire that would soon burn brighter than Ethan could ever imagine, a fire that would not be extinguished, not by him, not by anyone. Not today. Ethan's words hung in the air, a toxic cloud that made Maya's stomach churn, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the counter, the marble now feeling ice-cold under her fingers, a stark contrast to the heat of her rising anger. an anger that pulsed through her veins like a living thing, demanding to be heard, demanding justice, an anger that carried the weight of her mother's tears, the echoes of every rejection she'd ever faced, the pain of every story her friends had shared, a pain she now channeled into a quiet fury, a fury that would not be silenced. "People like me?" she repeated, her voice low but sharp, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward, refusing to let him off the hook, her defiance a quiet storm brewing beneath her calm exterior, a storm that had been building for years. Fueled by every slight, every dismissal, every moment she'd been made to feel less than because of the color of her skin, a storm that now raged within her, ready to break free, ready to reclaim the space she'd built, the space she deserved. Ethan's sneer returned, his arms uncrossing as he stood, his posture a deliberate attempt to assert dominance, his tone growing colder, more cutting, his words a weapon meant to wound, to push her out of the space he'd already decided she didn't belong in, a space she'd created with her own hands, a space she refused to be exiled from. "You heard me. We don't serve your kind here," he said, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of the other guests, their heads turning, a few murmurs rippling through the lobby, the air thickening with tension, a tension that felt like a physical thing, pressing down on Maya's shoulders, testing her resolve, a tension that made her heart race, her palms sweat, her resolve harden. Ethan's hand shot out, pointing a finger at her chest, a small but aggressive gesture that made Maya flinch, the motion a stark reminder of the power he thought he held, a power she was determined to challenge, a power she would not let him wield against her. Not today, not ever. A woman in a floral dress, mid-40s, who'd been sipping coffee in the waiting area, set her cup down with a clatter, her brow furrowing as she glanced at Maya, her expression a mix of confusion and discomfort, a small but telling sign that not everyone in the room shared Ethan's views, a sign that gave Maya a flicker of hope, a fragile thread of light in the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole, a hope that reminded her of the kindness she'd seen in strangers before, the kindness she'd built this hotel to foster, the kindness she now clung to as a lifeline. The woman's hands tightened around her cup, her knuckles whitening as she shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between Maya and Ethan, her discomfort a silent protest against the scene unfolding before her, a protest that Maya felt in her bones, a protest that gave her the strength to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep standing tall in the face of Ethan's cruelty. But that flicker of hope was quickly overshadowed by Ethan's next move. He reached for the phone on the counter, his fingers hovering over the buttons, his voice a low threat as he added, "Leave now, or I'll call security." His tone a venomous hiss, his eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. His threat a punch to Maya's gut, a blow that made her breath catch in her throat. The lobby growing quieter, the other guests now openly staring, their whispers a low hum that made Maya's skin prickle with the weight of their scrutiny, a scrutiny that felt like 1,000 eyes boring into her, judging her, waiting to see what she would do, waiting to see if she would break, a scrutiny that reminded her of the countless times she'd been watched, judged, dismissed, a scrutiny she refused to let define her. Not now, not ever. Just as Maya opened her mouth to respond, her voice trembling with the effort to stay calm, a new voice cut through the tension, soft but firm, coming from a bellhop who'd been stacking luggage nearby. A young man named Jamal, 22, with a kind face and a name tag that gleamed under the lobby lights, his dark eyes flashing with a quiet anger as he stepped forward, his hands tightening around the handle of a suitcase, his posture a mix of fear and defiance, a defiance born of a memory that had haunted him for years, a memory of his own mother being turned away from a store, her voice trembling as she whispered to him, "It's okay, Jamal, we'll go somewhere else." A memory that had shaped him, a memory that now drove him to speak, to act, to stand with Maya in this moment of injustice. "That's not right, Ethan," he said, his tone steady, his words a small act of courage that made Maya's heart lift, a glimmer of support in the suffocating atmosphere, a glimmer that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone, a glimmer that spoke of a shared struggle, a shared fight, a shared hope for something better, a hope that Jamal's mother had held on to, a hope that Maya now shared, a hope that would not be extinguished. Not by Ethan, not by anyone. Ethan's head snapped toward Jamal, his sneer morphing into a scowl, his pale blue eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity, his voice a low hiss as he shot back, "Stay out of this, Jamal, or you'll be out of a job." His words a cruel threat, a dagger to Maya's heart, a reminder of the power Ethan wielded, a power he was willing to use not just against her, but against anyone who dared to stand with her. A power trip that made her blood boil, her anger now tinged with a fierce protectiveness for the young man who'd risked so much to speak up, a protectiveness that fueled her resolve, turning her fear into a fire that burned brighter with every passing second, a fire that carried the weight of her mother's strength, Jamal's courage, and the dream she'd built this hotel to embody. Maya took a deep breath, her hand steadying on the counter, the cold marble now a grounding force, a reminder of the strength she'd built into this place, a strength she now drew upon as she faced Ethan, her voice calm but laced with steel, a steel forged in the fires of every injustice she'd ever faced, a steel that would not bend, would not break, would not yield. A steel that carried the echoes of her mother's whispers, the weight of Jamal's defiance, the hope of every guest who'd ever been turned away. "I'm not leaving until I get a room, or an explanation," she said, her words a challenge, a declaration, a line in the sand that Ethan could not cross without consequence, a line that set the stage for a reckoning she was ready to deliver, a reckoning that would honor her mother, support Jamal, and reclaim the dream she'd built, a dream that would not be destroyed, not by Ethan, not by anyone, not today. Ethan's scowl deepened, his hand slamming down on the phone, the sharp sound echoing through the lobby like a gunshot, a clear signal that this confrontation was far from over, a signal that the battle lines had been drawn, a signal that Maya was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for Jamal, for every guest who'd ever been turned away, for the dream she'd built this hotel to embody, a dream she would not let Ethan destroy, a dream she would defend with every ounce of her being, a dream that would rise from the ashes of this moment, stronger than ever before. Ethan's hand hovered over the phone, his finger trembling slightly as he dialed security, his scowl fixed on Maya, his pale blue eyes gleaming with a mix of arrogance and unease. A storm of tension brewing around him as every guest and employee in the lobby watched the scene unfold with bated breath, their murmurs fading into a heavy silence, the air charged with the weight of what was about to happen, a weight that pressed down on Maya's shoulders, testing her resolve, pushing her to the edge of a moment that would define everything she'd fought for. Maya stood her ground, her canvas bag slung over her shoulder, her jaw set with a quiet determination that belied the storm of emotions raging inside her. Anger at Ethan's blatant racism, a searing heat that burned in her chest with every memory of her mother's rejection, every story her friends had shared, every moment she'd been made to feel less than, and fear of what might happen next, a cold dread that whispered in the back of her mind, reminding her of the risks, the possibility of being forcibly removed, the humiliation that might follow, a fear that threatened to unravel her, but only for a moment, because beneath it all was a growing resolve, a resolve to expose the truth, to make this moment count, for every person who'd ever been turned away from this hotel she'd built with such hope, a resolve that turned her fear into fuel, her anger into a weapon she was ready to wield with precision. Before Ethan could finish the call, a new figure emerged from the back office, a woman in her 50s named Clara Evans, the hotel's assistant manager, her gray blazer slightly wrinkled from a long day, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern as she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the tiles with a sharp, authoritative rhythm that cut through the tension like a blade. Her presence a sudden shift in the dynamic, a potential ally Maya hadn't expected, a lifeline in a moment that felt like it could slip away at any second. "What's going on here?" Clara asked, her voice calm but firm, her dark eyes flicking between Ethan and Maya, her gaze steady, her posture commanding, a stark contrast to Ethan's faltering arrogance, a contrast that gave Maya a flicker of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, someone in this hotel still believed in the values she'd built it to embody. Values that now hung in the balance, waiting to be reclaimed or lost forever. Ethan's hand froze on the phone, his scowl faltering as he turned to Clara, his voice dripping with false innocence as he spoke, his words a desperate attempt to regain control, to paint himself as the victim in a situation he'd created, a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of his grasp. "This woman is causing a disturbance," he said, his tone laced with a forced calm, his eyes darting nervously between Clara and Maya, his fingers tightening on the phone as if it were his last lifeline, his last chance to escape the consequences of his actions. "She doesn't have a reservation, and I told her we're fully booked," he added, his lie a flimsy shield, a shield that Maya was ready to shatter, a shield that wouldn't protect him from the truth she was about to unleash, a truth that would change everything. Maya's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through Ethan's lie like a knife, her words steady but laced with a righteous anger that made Clara pause, her brow furrowing as she listened, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern, a shift that gave Maya the courage to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep standing tall in the face of Ethan's deceit. "That's not true," Maya said, her tone unwavering, her hands gesturing to the empty lobby around them, the lack of guests a stark contrast to Ethan's claim, a contrast that spoke louder than his words, a contrast that made his lie crumble before their eyes. "He refused me a room because of my race," she continued, her voice rising slightly, her anger now tinged with a fierce determination, a determination to make Clara see, to make everyone see, the injustice that had unfolded in this lobby, the lobby she'd built to be a sanctuary, not a battleground. "He said, 'We don't serve your kind here,' and now he's threatening to call security," she added, her words a thunderclap in the silence, a truth that reverberated through the space, a truth that drew a gasp from the onlookers, a collective intake of breath that echoed Maya's pain, her anger, her resolve. The woman in the floral dress shook her head in disbelief, her coffee cup forgotten on the table, her hands trembling as she clasped them together, her reaction a small but powerful validation of Maya's truth, a validation that gave her the strength to push forward, a strength that reminded her of the power of speaking out, the power of standing up, the power of refusing to be silenced. From her perspective, the scene was a stark reminder of her own privilege, a privilege she'd never had to question until now, a privilege that made her stomach churn with guilt, a guilt that compelled her to bear witness, to support Maya in her own quiet way, a support that Maya felt in her bones, a support that fueled her determination, a determination that now burned brighter than ever, a determination that would not be extinguished, not by Ethan. Clara's expression hardened, her gaze locking onto Ethan with a quiet intensity that made him shift uncomfortably, his hand slowly lowering the phone, his earlier arrogance now tinged with a flicker of doubt, a doubt that hinted at the reckoning to come, a doubt that made Maya's heart race with a mix of hope and anticipation, a hope that justice might finally prevail, an anticipation of the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment she'd been fighting for, the moment that would change everything. "Is that true, Ethan?" Clara asked, her voice low but sharp, her arms crossing as she took a step closer, her authority a lifeline Maya hadn't expected, a lifeline that tilted the balance ever so slightly in her favor, a balance that gave her the courage to take the next step, to make her move, to turn this confrontation into a moment of undeniable truth. Ethan stammered, his pale face flushing, as he scrambled for an excuse, his words tripping over themselves in a desperate attempt to save himself. But Maya wasn't done. She reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against her phone, her mind racing with a plan that would soon turn this confrontation into a moment of reckoning, a moment that would expose Ethan's prejudice for all to see, a moment that would change everything in the Sterling Heights Hotel, a moment she was ready to seize with both hands. Maya's fingers closed around her phone, her heart pounding as she pulled it out, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving Ethan's as she began recording, the small red dot on the screen a silent promise of accountability, a promise that made Ethan's flush deepen, his hands clenching at his sides, his earlier arrogance now a crumbling facade, a facade that Maya was ready to tear down, brick by brick, with the truth she'd been holding back, a truth that would turn the tables, a truth that would make him regret ever crossing her. "Let's make this clear for everyone," she said, her voice steady, her tone a mix of calm and steel, a steel forged in the fires of every injustice she'd ever faced, a steel that carried the weight of her mother's tears, the strength of Jamal's defiance, the hope of every guest who'd ever been turned away, a steel that now echoed through the lobby, a lobby that fell deathly silent, every eye on her, the air charged with the weight of what was about to happen, a weight that made Maya's skin prickle with anticipation, a weight that told her this was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment she'd been fighting for, the moment that would change everything. Ethan's eyes widened, his mouth opening to protest, but Clara stepped forward, her hand raised to silence him, her expression a mix of shock and determination, her voice sharp as she turned to Maya. Her words a small but crucial act of support, a support that made Maya's heart soar with a mix of relief and gratitude, a relief that she wasn't alone, a gratitude for Clara's willingness to listen, to see, to act. "Let her speak, Ethan," Clara said, her tone leaving no room for argument, her gray blazer catching the light as she moved, a beacon of authority in the chaos unfolding before her, a beacon that reminded Maya of the strength she'd built into this hotel, a strength she now drew upon, a strength that would not let her down, not now, not ever. The woman in the floral dress stood, her coffee cup abandoned, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her eyes shining with a mix of awe and anger, a silent ally in the crowd. Her presence a reminder that Maya's fight was resonating beyond the counter, a reminder that her voice was being heard, her truth was being seen, her justice was within reach. Maya took a deep breath, her voice rising, her words echoing through the lobby with a power that seemed to shake the very walls she'd designed to hold stories of hope, not hatred. Walls that now bore witness to a moment of reckoning, a moment that would redefine their purpose, a moment that would honor the dreams she'd poured into every beam, every tile, every window. "My name is Maya Carter," she said, her tone a declaration, her phone still recording as she stepped closer to the counter, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the tiles, a sound that seemed to punctuate her words, a sound that carried the weight of her journey, her struggle, her triumph. "I'm the architect who designed this hotel," she continued, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with a fire that had been building since the moment Ethan had sneered at her, a fire that now burned with the heat of justice, a fire that illuminated the truth for all to see, a fire that would not be extinguished, not by Ethan, not by anyone, not today. "I poured my heart into every detail, every beam, every window, to make this a place where everyone would feel welcome." Maya said, her words a rallying cry, a testament to the vision she'd fought for, a vision that had been born from her mother's pain, a vision that had driven her through every challenge, every doubt, every moment she'd had to prove her worth in a world that often refused to see it, a vision that now stood on the brink of being reclaimed, a vision that would not be denied. "And you," she pointed at Ethan, her finger steady, her eyes blazing, "you just turned away the woman who built this place because of the color of her skin," she finished, her words a thunderclap in the silence, a truth that reverberated through the lobby, a truth that shattered Ethan's arrogance like glass, a truth that drew gasps from the onlookers, a collective intake of breath that echoed Maya's triumph. A triumph that had been a long time coming. A triumph that had been a long... The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's face draining of color, his hands dropping to his sides, his earlier arrogance shattered under the weight of Maya's revelation, a revelation that ripped his world apart, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, no words coming out, his entire career collapsing around him as the lobby erupted in gasps. The woman in the floral dress letting out a soft cry of shock, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief, a disbelief that mirrored the expressions of the other guests, a disbelief that gave Maya a sense of vindication, a vindication that turned her anger into pride, a pride that burned bright in her chest, a pride that told her she'd done it, she'd exposed the truth, she'd won. Jamal's eyes shone with pride as he stepped closer to Maya, his presence a quiet show of solidarity, a solidarity that reminded Maya of the bond they'd formed in the heat of this battle, a bond that would not be broken, a bond that would carry them forward, together. Ethan stammered, his voice barely a whisper, his words a feeble attempt to save himself, but Maya wasn't done. She turned to the crowd, her voice a rallying cry, her phone capturing every moment, every face, every reaction, a record of justice that would echo far beyond this lobby, a record that would ensure this never happened again, a record that would stand as a testament to the power of standing out, the power of speaking out, the power of fighting for what's right, a power that Maya had wielded with every ounce of her being, a power that had changed everything. Ethan stood frozen, his pale face now ashen, his hands trembling as he gripped the counter. The weight of Maya's revelation crashed over him like an unstoppable force. It washed away his earlier sneer, leaving behind sheer panic, an expression that spoke of a career slipping through his fingers like sand. His career, built on prejudice, now lay in ruins at Maya's feet. Maya lowered her phone, her chest heaving, her heart pounding not with fear, but with fierce victory. This feeling surged within her, illuminating her spirit. It told her she'd stood up for herself, and for every person turned away from this hotel. She'd fought for everyone who'd felt the sting of prejudice in a place meant to be a sanctuary. Her victory transformed her earlier anger into radiant joy, an exhale that released the pain she'd carried for so long. That pain had fueled her fight. Now it gave way to a win she'd earned with every ounce of her being. Clara turned to Ethan, her voice a quiet storm, her gray blazer symbolizing the authority she wielded with unwavering resolve. That authority had been awakened by Maya's truth. It stood as proof of the justice Maya had fought for, a justice that would not be denied today or ever. "You're done here, Ethan," she declared, her words a decisive strike. Her tone left no room for argument. It carried the weight of every policy this hotel had failed to uphold. It promised renewal, echoing through the lobby. The space now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter. Maya had written that chapter with her bravery, her determination, her unyielding spirit. Ethan's mouth opened, a feeble protest forming, but Clara cut him off, her hand raised, her eyes blazing with righteous fury that mirrored Maya's own. That fury spoke of a woman who'd seen enough, who'd had enough, who would not let this moment pass without consequence. "Pack your things and leave, now!" Clara commanded, her tone resolute. Her decision served as a public lesson in accountability. It would ripple through the hotel staff, ensuring such behavior was never tolerated again. Maya felt this lesson deep within, transforming her sense of victory into gratitude. She was thankful for Clara's willingness to act, to stand with her, to fight for the ideals Maya had poured into this hotel. Those ideals had been tarnished but not destroyed. Now they were being reclaimed, piece by piece, moment by moment, word by word. The woman in the floral dress stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly, her voice trembling as she spoke. Her words were a small yet powerful act of support that warmed Maya's heart, a heart battered but not broken. It swelled with the realization that she wasn't alone, that her fight had touched others, that her voice had been heard. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," the woman said, her eyes shimmering with tears. Her apology built a bridge between them. Maya crossed it with a gentle nod, her growth evident in her readiness to accept the gesture. She saw the good in those who chose to stand with her, a readiness that spoke of healing. That healing would carry her forward, redefining her legacy. Maya turned to Clara, her voice softer now, her anger giving way to steadfast resolve. That determination spoke of the renewal she'd already sparked, the renewal she'd continue to champion. It carried the weight of every guest who'd been turned away, every story her friends had shared, every tear her mother had shed. It now stood as a beacon of possibility. a possibility that this hotel could embody her ideals. It could be a place where justice prevailed, where the future shone brighter than the past. "I want this hotel to be what I dreamed it could be," she said, her words both a plea and a vow. Her hands rested lightly on the counter, the marble now warm beneath her touch. It symbolized the warmth she aimed to restore, a warmth absent when she'd first walked in, now within reach. That warmth would define the Sterling Heights Hotel from this day forward. Clara nodded, her expression softening. She reached out to clasp Maya's hand in a firm handshake, a gesture of solidarity that sealed their partnership. Together, they would rebuild this hotel into a true haven for all, united by shared ideals, a shared fight, a shared win. Ethan was escorted out by security, his head bowed, his career in tatters. His actions became a cautionary tale for every employee who'd ever thought prejudice could go unchecked. That tale would linger long after he was gone. Maya had written it with her courage. It served as a warning, a reminder, a pledge that justice would always prevail. It would stand firm even in the face of hatred, fear, or a world that resisted renewal. Jamal approached Maya, his eyes shining with admiration, his hands clasping hers in a warm grip. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. His words testified to the bond they'd formed in the heat of this battle, a bond forged in defiance, strengthened by victory, a bond that would endure through time. "You were incredible, Ms. Carter," he said, his grip a silent promise of friendship. It reminded Maya she'd gained more than justice today. She'd gained allies, a community, a family. They would stand with her, fight with her, dream with her. Maya smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in hours. Her journey from humiliation to victory was complete. Her legacy as the architect of this hotel was now redefined, a legacy of bravery, of justice, of possibility. It would stand as a testament to the power of standing up, speaking out, and fighting for what's right. It would inspire others. It would endure. The hotel staff gathered around, their faces a mix of shame and determination. Their voices formed a chorus of commitment to renewal. A chorus Maya knew would carry this hotel into a brighter future. She had fought for that future. She had won it. It would honor the ideals she'd poured into every brick, beam, and window. Ideals that had been tested but not broken. They now shone brighter than ever, welcoming all just as she'd always intended, just as she'd always believed they could. 6 months later, the Sterling Heights Hotel stood transformed, an emblem of inclusivity that Maya had always dreamed it could be. Its lobby now buzzed with the scent of fresh flowers and the sound of laughter. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the tiled floor. That radiance mirrored the progress Maya had inspired, a progress absent on that humid July afternoon. Now it embraced every guest who walked through its doors, speaking of a promise kept, a vision reclaimed, a future secured. New policies were in place, mandatory diversity training for all staff, a guest feedback system to ensure every voice was heard, and a public commitment to equity. That commitment was displayed on a plaque near the entrance, its brass letters gleaming with the vow Maya had fought for, a home for all. Those words carried the weight of her struggle, the strength of her vision, the power of her victory. They stood as proof of what bravery could achieve. They filled Maya with fulfillment and faith, fulfillment in what she'd accomplished, faith in what was yet to come. She believed this hotel would remain a sanctuary, a haven, a home for all who sought it. Maya became a mentor to the staff, her presence a constant in the hotel. Her guidance served as a beacon for those who'd once felt invisible. Her legacy, as the architect, now stood as an emblem of resilience. An emblem that inspired others to stand up, speak out, and fight for what was right. It reminded Maya of the strength of her own voice, a strength she'd discovered in the heat of that confrontation. She now shared that strength with others. It turned her earlier victory into a lasting mission, a calling that would shape her future and the future of this hotel, a future she'd fought for, a future she'd won. Clara took on the role of head manager, her gray blazer now an emblem of the progress she'd helped usher in. Her leadership testified to the power of accountability. Her actions quietly acknowledged the lessons she'd learned from Maya, lessons that turned her from a bystander into an advocate. That shift would shape the hotel's future for years to come. It made Maya smile, a smile that spoke of a partnership that had grown, endured, and transformed everything. From the perspective of a new guest named Aisha, a 30-year-old black woman who'd heard Maya's story through the grapevine, the hotel was a revelation. She felt seen, valued, welcomed. Unlike the stories she'd heard of other hotels, tales that had made her hesitant and fearful, those tales had made her question whether such a place could truly exist. This hotel proved otherwise, giving her the courage to book her family reunion there. Her decision filled the lobby with laughter, love, and the kind of joy Maya had always envisioned. That joy filled Aisha with gratitude, faith, and belonging. Gratitude for the woman who'd made this possible, faith in a world where such places could be the norm, belonging to a legacy that began with one woman's bravery, voice, and fight. Aisha's children ran through the lobby, their laughter echoing off the walls. Their joy was a living testament to Maya's vision, a vision that had once been an aspiration, now a reality. It had changed everything for Aisha, her family, and every guest who walked through those doors. It turned Maya's pain into purpose, her struggle into strength, her victory into a legacy that would endure. At the hotel's annual gala, a new award was introduced in Maya's honor, the Carter Courage Award. Its first recipient was a young employee who'd spoken up against a discriminatory policy. Her bravery reflected Maya's own. Her story testified to the ripple effect of Maya's stand, an effect that had reshaped the hotel, the community, and the lives of everyone who'd heard her story. That effect brought tears to Maya's eyes, a blend of fulfillment and humility. She'd felt fulfilled by the impact she'd had. She felt humbled by those who'd been inspired by her, humility that spoke of a woman who'd never sought glory, only justice. She'd never sought recognition, only progress. She'd found both, not through ambition but through bravery, love, and faith. Maya's journey touched countless lives. It was a story of justice that showed the world what happens when bravery meets prejudice. Its impact became a song of progress that wouldn't fade, a song carrying a message of resilience, unity, and the power of standing up for what's right. That song would echo through the halls of the Sterling Heights Hotel. It would echo through the hearts of all who heard it. It would inspire a new generation to fight, dream, and believe. Maya's fight reminds us that our voices, our bravery, can break through even the toughest barriers. Standing up to prejudice can create a ripple effect of progress. That progress starts with an act of courage. It can touch countless lives. Maya embodied that progress. We can embody it too. It begins with us, with you, with me, with all of us together. We stand as one, fight as one, dream as one. Have you ever faced discrimination and turned it into a moment of triumph? Did it inspire others to stand with you? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you've found your voice, fought for justice, and made a difference, just like Maya. Her bravery lit the way, her story lights the way, her legacy will light the way for years to come. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales of courage and progress. These narratives inspire us to build a world where every voice is heard, where every person is welcomed, a world Maya dreamed of, a world we can create, a world we must create together, today, tomorrow, always. Let's stand together for a brighter future. Let no one be turned away. Let every door be open to all. That future begins with us, with you, with bravery, with love.